Psalm 74 of the Treasury of David. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Marianne. The Treasury of David, Volume 3, by Charles Spurgeon. Psalm 74. Title: Maskil of Asaph. An instructive psalm by Asaph. The history of the suffering church is always edifying. When we see how the faithful trusted and wrestled with their God in times of dire distress, we are thereby taught how to behave ourselves under similar circumstances. We learn, moreover, that when the fiery trial befalls us, no strange thing has happened unto us. We are following the trail of the host of God. Division. From verse 1 to 11, the poet pleads the sorrows of the nation, and the despite done to the assemblies of the Lord. Then he urges former displays of divine power as a reason for present deliverance, verses 12 to 23. Whether it is a prophetic psalm, intended for use in troubles foreseen, or whether it was written by a later Asaph, after the invasion by Sennacherib or during the Maccabean Wars, it would be very hard to determine. But we see no difficulty in the first supposition. Exposition. Verses 1 to 11. O God, why hast thou cast us off for ever? Why doth thine anger smoke against the sheep of thy pasture? Remember thy congregation, which thou hast purchased of old, the rod of thine inheritance, which thou hast redeemed, this Mount Zion, wherein thou hast dwelt. Lift up thy feet unto the perpetual desolations, even all that the enemy hath done wickedly in the sanctuary. Thine enemies roar in the midst of thy congregations. They set up their ensigns for signs. A man was famous according as he had lifted up axes upon the thick trees. But now they break down the carved work thereof at once with axes and hammers. They have cast fire into thy sanctuary. They have defiled by casting down the dwelling place of thy name to the ground. They said in their hearts, Let us destroy them together. They have burned up all the synagogues of God in the land. We see not our signs. There is no more any prophet, neither is there any among us who knoweth how long. O God, how long shall the adversary reproach? Shall the enemy blaspheme thy name forever? Why withdrawest thou thy hand, even thy right hand? Pluck it out of thy bosom. Verse 1. O God, why hast thou cast us off forever? To cast us off at all were hard, but when thou dost for so long a time desert thy people, it is an evil beyond all endurance, the very chief of woes, an abyss of misery. It is our wisdom when under chastisement to inquire, Show me wherefore thou contendest with me. And if the affliction be a protracted one, we should the more eagerly inquire the purport of it. Sin is usually at the bottom of all the hidings of the Lord's face. Let us ask the Lord to reveal the special form of it to us, that we may repent of it, overcome it, and henceforth forsake it. When a church is in a forsaken condition, it must not sit still in apathy, but turn to the hand which smiteth it, and humbly inquire the reason why. At the same time, the inquiry of the text is a faulty one, for it implies two mistakes. There are two questions which only admit of negative replies. Hath God cast away his people? Romans chapter 11, verse 1. And the other, Will the Lord cast off forever? Psalm 77, verse 7. God is never weary of his people so as to abhor them, and even when his anger is turned against them, it is but for a small moment, and with a view to their eternal good. Grief in its distraction asks strange questions and surmises impossible terrors. It is a wonder of grace that the Lord has not long ago put us away as men lay aside cast-off garments, but he hateth putting away, and will still be patient with his chosen. Why doth thine anger smoke against the sheep of thy pasture? They are thine. They are the objects of thy care. They are poor, silly, and defenseless things. Pity them, forgive them, and come to their rescue. They are but sheep. Do not continue to be wroth with them. It is a terrible thing when the anger of God smokes, but it is an infinite mercy that it does not break into a devouring flame. It is meet to pray the Lord to remove every sign of his wrath, for it is to those who are truly the Lord's sheep a most painful thing to be the objects of his displeasure. To vex the Holy Spirit is no mean sin, and yet how frequently we are guilty of it. Hence it is no marvel that we are often under a cloud. Verse 2. Remember thy congregation, which thou hast purchased of old. What a mighty plea is redemption. O God, canst thou see the blood mark on thine own sheep, and yet allow grievous wolves to devour them? The church is no new purchase of the Lord. From before the world's foundation the chosen were regarded as redeemed by the Lamb slain. Shall ancient love die out, and the eternal purpose become frustrate? The Lord would have his people remember the paschal lamb, the blood-stained lintel, and the overthrow of Egypt. And will he forget all this himself? Let us put him in remembrance. Let us plead together. Can he desert his blood-bought and forsake his redeemed? Can election fail and eternal love cease to flow? Impossible. The woes of Calvary and the covenant of which they are the seal are the security of the saints. The rod of thine inheritance which thou hast redeemed. So sweet a plea deserved to be repeated and enlarged upon. The Lord's portion is his people. Will he lose his inheritance? His church is his kingdom over which he stretches the rod of sovereignty. Will he allow his possessions to be torn from him? God's property in us is a fact full of comfort. His value of us, his dominion over us, his connection with us are all so many lights to cheer our darkness. No man will willingly lose his inheritance, and no prince will relinquish his dominions. Therefore we believe that the King of Kings will hold his own and maintain his rights against all comers. This Mount Zion wherein thou hast dwelt. The Lord's having made Zion the especial centre of worship and place of his manifestation is yet another plea for the preservation of Jerusalem. Shall the sacred temple of Jehovah be desecrated by heathen, and the throne of the great King be defiled by his enemies? Has the Spirit of God dwelt in our hearts, and will he leave them to become a haunt for the devil? Has he sanctified us by his indwelling, and will he, after all, vacate the throne? God forbid. It may be well to note that this psalm was evidently written with a view to the temple upon Zion, and not to the tabernacle which was there in David's time, and was a mere tent. But the destructions here bewailed were exercised upon the carved work of a substantial structure. Those who had seen the glory of God in Solomon's peerless temple might well mourn in bitterness when the Lord allowed his enemies to make an utter ruin of that matchless edifice. Verse 3. Lift up thy feet unto the perpetual desolations. The ruin made had already long been an eyesore to the suppliant, and there seemed no hope of restoration. Havoc lorded it not only for a day or a year, but with perpetual power. This is another argument with God. Would Jehovah sit still and see his own land made a wilderness, his own palace a desolation? Until he should arise and draw near, the desolation would remain. Only his presence could cure the evil. Therefore is he entreated to hasten with uplifted feet for the deliverance of his people. Even all that the enemy hath done wickedly in the sanctuary. Every stone in the ruined temple appealed to the Lord. On all sides were the marks of impious spoilers. The holiest places bore evidence of their malicious wickedness. Would the Lord for ever permit this? Would he not hasten to overthrow the foe who defiled him to his face and profaned the throne of his God? Faith finds pleas in the worst circumstances. She uses even the fallen stones of her desolate palaces, and assails with them the gates of heaven, casting them forth with the engine of prayer. Verse 4. Thine enemies roar in the midst of thy congregations. Where thy people sang like angels, these barbarians roar like beasts. Where thy saints came together for worship, these cruel men attack them with all the fury of lions. They have no respect for the most solemn gatherings, but intrude themselves and their blasphemies into our most hallowed meetings. How often in times of persecution or prevalent heresy has the church learned the meaning of such language? May the Lord spare us such misery. When hypocrites abound in the church and pollute her worship, the case is parallel to that before us. Lord, save us from so severe a trial. They set up their ensigns for signs. Idolatrous emblems used in war were set up over God's altar as an insulting token of victory and of contempt for the vanquished and for their God. Papists, Arians, and the modern school of Neologians have in their day set up their ensigns for signs. Superstition, unbelief, and carnal wisdom have endeavored to usurp the place of Christ crucified, to the grief of the church of God. The enemies without do us small damage, but those within the church cause her serious harm. By supplanting the truth and placing error in its stead, they deceive the people, and lead multitudes to destruction. As a Jew felt a holy horror when he saw an idolatrous emblem set up in the holy place, even so do we when in a Protestant church we see the fooleries of Rome, and when from pulpits, once occupied by men of God, we hear philosophy and vain deceit. Verse 5. A man was famous according as he had lifted up axes upon the thick trees. Once men were renowned for felling the cedars and preparing them for building the temple, but now the axe finds other work, and men are as proud of destroying as their fathers were of erecting. Thus in the olden times our sires dealt sturdy blows against the forests of error, and labored hard to lay the axe at the root of the trees. But, alas, their sons appear to be quite as diligent to destroy the truth and to overthrow all that their fathers built up. Oh, for the good old times again! Oh, for an hour of Luther's hatchet or Calvin's mighty axe! Verse 6. But now they break down the carved work thereof at once with axes and hammers. The invaders were as industrious to destroy as the ancient builders had been to construct. Such fair carving it was barbarous to hew in pieces, but the Vandals had no mercy and broke down all with any weapon which came to hand. In these days men are using axes and sledgehammers against the gospel and the church. Glorious truths, far more exquisite than the godliest carving, are cavilled over and smashed by the blows of modern criticism. Truths, which have upheld the afflicted and cheered the dying, are smitten by pretentious Goths, who would be accounted learned, but know not the first principle of the truth. With sharp ridicule and heavy blows of sophistry, they break the faith of some, and would, if it were possible, destroy the confidence of the elect themselves. Assyrians, Babylonians, and Romans are but types of spiritual foes who labor to crush the truth and the people of God. Verse 7. They have cast fire into thy sanctuary. Axes and hammers were not sufficient for the purpose of the destroyers, they must needs try fire. Malice knows no bounds. Those who hate God are never sparing of the most cruel weapons. To this day the enmity of the human heart is quite as great as ever, and, if providence did not restrain, the saints would still be as fuel for the flames. They have defiled by casting down the dwelling place of thy name to the ground. They made a heap of the temple, and left not one stone upon another. When the Lord left Mount Zion, and the Roman gained entrance, the military fury led the soldiery to burn out and root up the memorial of the famous house of the Lord. Could the powers of darkness have their way, a like fate would befall the church of Christ. Raze it, they say, raze it even to the foundations thereof. Defilement to the church is destruction. Her foes would defile her till nothing of her purity, and consequently of her real self, remained. Yet, even if they could wreak their will upon the cause of Christ, they are not able to destroy it. It would survive their blows and fires. The Lord would hold them still like dogs on a leash, and in the end frustrate all their designs. Verse 8. They said in their hearts, let us destroy them together. It was no idle wish. Their cruelty was sincere, deep-seated, and a matter of the inmost heart. Extirpation was the desire of Haman, and the aim of many another tyrant. Not a remnant of the people of God would have been left if oppressors could have had their way. Pharaoh's policy to stamp out the nation has been a precedent for others. Yet the Jews survive, and will. The bush, though burning, has not been consumed. Even thus, the church of Christ has gone through baptisms of blood and fire, but it is all the brighter for them. They have burned up all the synagogues of God in the land. Here is no allusion to places called synagogues, but to assemblies, and as no assemblies for worship were held but in one place, the ruin of the temple was the destruction of all the holy gatherings, and so in effect all the meeting places were destroyed. One object of persecutors has always been to put an end to all conventicles, as they call them. Keep them from meeting, and you will scatter them. So have the foemen said. But, glory be to God, saints are independent of walls, and have met on the hillside, by the moss, or in the catacombs, or in a boat at sea. Yet has the attempt been almost successful, and the hunt so hot, that the faithful have wandered in solitude, and their solemn congregations have been under such circumstances few and far between. What signs and cries have in such times gone up to the ears of the Lord God of Sabaoth. How happy are we that we can meet for worship in any place we choose, and none dare molest us. Verse 9. We see not our signs. Alas, poor Israel! No Urim and Thummim blazed on the high priest's bosom, and no Shekinah shone from between the cherubim. The smoke of sacrifice and cloud of incense no more arose from the holy hill. Solemn feasts were suspended, and even circumcision, the covenant sign, was forbidden by the tyrant. We, too, as believers, know what it is to lose our evidence and grope in darkness, and too often do our churches also miss the tokens of the Redeemer's presence, and their lamps remain untrimmed. Sad plaint of a people under a cloud. There is no more any prophet. Prophecy was suspended. No inspiring psalm or consoling promise fell from bard or seer. It is ill with the people of God when the voice of the preacher of the gospel fails, and a famine of the word of life falls on the people. God-sent ministers are needful to the saints as their daily bread, and it is a great sorrow when a congregation is destitute of a faithful pastor. It is to be feared that with all the ministers now existing, there is yet a dearth of men whose hearts and tongues are touched with the celestial fire. Neither is there any among us that knoweth how long. If some one could foretell an end, the evil might be borne with a degree of patience, but when none can see a termination, or foretell an escape, the misery has a hopeless appearance, and is overwhelming. Blessed be God, he has not left his church in these days to be so deplorably destitute of cheering words. Let us pray that he never may. Contempt of the word is very common, and may well provoke the Lord to withdraw it from us. May his long-suffering endure the strain, and his mercy afford us still the word of life. Verse 10. O God, how long shall the adversary reproach? Though we know not how long, yet thou dost. The times and seasons are with thee. When God is reproached, there is hope for us, for it may be he will hearken and avenge his dishonored name. Wickedness has great license allowed it, and justice lingers on the road. God has his reasons for delay, and his seasons for action, and in the end it shall be seen that he is not slack concerning his promise as some men count slackness. Shall the enemy blaspheme thy name forever? He will do so forever, unless thou dost give him his quietus. Wilt thou never defend thyself, and stop slanderous tongues? Wilt thou always endure the jeers of the profane? Is there to be no end to all this sacrilege and cursing? Yes, it shall all be ended, but not by and by. There is a time for the sinner to rage, and a time in which patience bears with him, yet it is but a time, and then, then. Verse 11. Why withdrawest thou thy hand, even thy right hand? Wherefore this inaction, this indifference for thine own honour and thy people's safety? How bold is the suppliant! Does he err? Nay, verily. We who are so chill and distant and listless in prayer are the erring ones. The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and he who learns the art shall surely prevail with God by its means. It is fit that we should inquire why the work of grace goes on so slowly, and the enemy has so much power over men. The inquiry may suggest practical reflections of unbounded value. Why dost thou from the conflict stay? Why do thy chariot wheels delay? Lift up thyself, hell's kingdom shake. Arm of the Lord, awake, awake. Pluck it out of thy bosom. A bold simile, but dying men must venture for their lives. When God seems to fold arms, we must not fold ours, but rather renew our entreaties that he would again put his hand to the work. Oh, for more agony in prayer among professing Christians, then should we see miracles of grace. We have here before us a model of pleading, a very rapture of prayer. It is humble, but very bold, eager, fervent, and effectual. The heart of God is always moved by such entreaties. When we bring forth our strong reasons, then he will bring forth his choice mercies. Verses 12 to 23. For God is my King of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength. Thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the waters. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan in pieces, and gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. Thou didst cleave the fountain and the flood. Thou driedst up mighty rivers. The day is thine, the night also is thine. Thou hast prepared the light and the sun. Thou hast set all the borders of the earth. Thou hast made summer and winter. Remember this, that the enemy hath reproached, O Lord, and that the foolish people have blasphemed thy name. O deliver not the soul of thy turtle dove unto the multitude of the wicked. Forget not the congregation of thy poor for ever. Have respect unto the covenant, for the dark places of the earth are full of the habitations of cruelty. O let not the oppressed return ashamed. Let the poor and needy praise thy name. Arise, O God, plead thine own cause. Remember how the foolish man reproacheth thee daily. Forget not the voice of thine enemies. The tumult of those that rise up against thee increaseth continually. Having spread the sad case before the Lord, the pleader now urges another series of arguments for divine help. He reasons from the Lord's former wonders of grace and his deeds of power, imploring a repetition of the same divine works. Verse 12. For God is my King of old. How consoling is this avowal! Israel in holy loyalty acknowledges her King, and claims to have been his possession from of old, and thence she derives a plea for defence and deliverance. If the Lord be indeed the sole monarch of our bosoms, he will in his love put forth his strength on our behalf. If from eternity he has claimed us as his own, he will preserve us from the insulting foe. Working salvation in the midst of the earth. From the most remote period of Israel's history, the Lord had worked out for her many salvations, especially at the Red Sea. The very heart of the world was astonished by his wonders of deliverance. Now, every believer may plead at this day the ancient deeds of the Lord, the work of Calvary, the overthrow of sin, death, and hell. He who wrought out our salvation of old will not, cannot desert us. Each past miracle of grace assures us that he who has begun to deliver will continue to redeem us from all evil. His deeds of old were public and wrought in the teeth of his foes. They were no delusions or make-believes, and, therefore, in all our perils, we look for true and manifest assistance, and we shall surely receive it. Verse 13. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength. Infinite power split the Red Sea in twain. Israel delighted to rehearse this famous act of the Lord. Thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the waters. Monsters long accustomed to the deep found themselves left high and dry. Huge things of the sea cave and the coral grot were deprived of their vital element and left with crushed heads upon the dry channel bed. There, too, that old dragon Pharaoh was utterly broken, and Egypt herself had the head of her power and pomp broken with an almighty blow. Even thus is that old dragon broken by him who came to bruise the serpent's head, and the sea of wrath no longer rolls before us. We pass through it dry-shod. Our faith as to the present is revived by glad memories of the past. Verse 14. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan into pieces. It is the Lord who has done it all. The mighty dragon of Egypt was utterly slain, and his proud heads broken in pieces. Our Lord Jesus is the true Hercules. Dragons with 100 heads are crushed beneath his foot. The infernal hydra he utterly vanquishes. And gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. Not only did the wild beasts feed upon the carcasses of the Egyptians, but the dwellers along the shores stripped the bodies and enriched themselves with the spoil. Israel, too, grew rich with the relics of her doomed adversaries. How often do great afflictions work our lasting good? Leviathan, who would have devoured us, is himself devoured, and out of the monster we gather sweetness. Let us not give way to fear. Hydra-headed evils shall be slain, and monstrous difficulties shall be overcome, and all things shall work our lasting good. Verse 15. Thou didst cleave the fountain in the flood. Jordan was divided by Jehovah's power. The Lord is able to repeat his miracles. What he did with a sea he can do with a river. Lesser difficulties shall be removed as well as greater ones. Perhaps the fountain refers to the smitten rock, which from its cleft poured forth a perpetual stream, so the Lord opens to us springs of water in the wilderness. Thou driedst up mighty rivers. Rivers which were permanent, and not like the transient torrents of the land, were dried up for a while. The Jordan itself, being such, was laid dry for a season. Observe the repetition of the pronoun thou. The song is all for God, and the prayer is all directed to him. The argument is that he who wrought such wonders would be pleased to do the like now that an emergency had arisen. Verse 16. The day is thine, the night also is thine. Thou art not restricted by times and seasons. Our prosperity comes from thee, and our adversary is ordained by thee. Thou rulest in the darkness, and one glance of thine eye kindles it into day. Lord, be not slack to keep thy word, but rise for the help of thy people. Thou hast prepared the light and the sun. Both the light and the light bearer are of thee. Our help and the instrument of it are both in thy hand. There is no limit to thy power. Be pleased to display it and make thy people glad. Let thy sacred preparations of mercy ripen. Say, let there be light, and light shall at once dispel our gloom. Verse 17. Thou hast set all the borders of the earth. Land and sea receive their boundaries from thee. Continents and islands are mapped by thy hand. Observe again how everything is ascribed to the divine agency by the use of the pronoun thou. Not a word about natural laws and original forces, but the Lord is seen as working all. It will be well when our ologies are tinctured with theology, and the Creator is seen at work amid his universe. The argument of our text is, that he who bounds the sea can restrain his foes, and he who guards the borders of the dry land can also protect his chosen. Thou hast made summer and winter. Return then, good Lord, to us the bright summer days of joy. We know that all our changes come from thee. We have already felt the rigours of thy winter. Grant us now the genial glow of thy summer smile. The God of nature is the God of grace, and we may argue from the revolving seasons that sorrow is not meant to rule the year. The flowers of hope will blossom, and ruddy fruits of joy will ripen yet. Verse 18. Remember this, that the enemy hath reproached, O Lord. Against thee, the ever-glorious maker of all things, have they spoken. Thine honour have they assailed, and defiled even thee. This is forcible pleading indeed, and reminds us of Moses and Hezekiah in their intercessions. What wilt thou do unto thy great name? It may be that the Lord thy God will hear the words of Rabshakeh, who hath reproached the living God. Jehovah is a jealous God, and will surely glorify his own name. Here our hope finds foothold. And that the foolish people have blasphemed thy name. The meanness of the enemy is here pleaded. Sinners are fools, and shall fools be allowed to insult the Lord and oppress his people? Shall the abjects curse the Lord and defy him to his face? When error grows too bold, its day is near, and its fall certain. Arrogance foreshadows ripeness of evil, and the next step is rottenness. Instead of being alarmed when bad men grow worse and more audacious, we may reasonably take heart, for the hour of their judgment is evidently near. Verse 19. O deliver not the soul of thy turtle-dove unto the multitude of the wicked. Thy poor church is weak and defenceless as a dove, but yet her adversaries cannot touch her without thy permission. Do not give them leave to devour her. Consign her not to the merciless fangs of her foes. She is thy dove, thy turtle-dove, thy favoured one. Do not cast her to her enemies. Be merciful and preserve the weak. Thus may we each plead, and with good hope of prevailing, for the Lord is very pitiful and full of compassion. Forget not the congregation of thy poor for ever. They look to thee for everything, for they are very poor, and they are thy poor, and there is a company of them connected by thyself. Do not turn thy back on them for long. Do not appear strange unto them, but let their poverty plead with thee. Turn thou unto them, and visit thine afflicted. In such pleas we can also personally join when at any time we are sorely tried, and the Lord's presence is hidden from us. Verse 20. Have respect unto the covenant. Here's the master key. Heaven's gate must open to this. God is not a man that he should lie. His covenant he will not break, nor alter the thing that hath gone forth out of his lips. The Lord had promised to bless the seed of Abraham and make them a blessing. Here they plead that ancient word, even as we also may plead the covenant made with the Lord Jesus for all believers. What a grand word it is. Reader, do you know how to cry, have respect unto thy covenant? For the dark places of the earth are full of the habitations of cruelty. Darkness is the fit hour for beasts of prayer, and ignorance of the natural dwelling place of cruelty. All the world is in a measure dark, and hence everywhere there are cruel enemies of the Lord's people. But in some places a sevenfold night of superstition and unbelief has settled down, and there rage against the saints reaches to madness. Has not the Lord declared that the whole earth shall be filled with his glory? How can this be if he always permits cruelty to riot in dark places? Surely he must arise, and end the days of wrong, the era of oppression. This verse is a most telling missionary prayer. Verse 21. O let not the oppressed return ashamed. Though broken and crushed, they come to thee with confidence. Suffer them not to be disappointed, for then they will be ashamed of their hope. Let the poor and needy praise thy name. By thy speedy answer to their cries, make their hearts glad, and they will render to thee their gladdest songs. It is not the way of the Lord to allow any of those who trust in him to be put to shame, for his word is, He shall call upon me, and I will deliver him, and he shall glorify me. Verse 22. Arise, O God, plead thine own cause. Answer thou the taunts of the profane by arguments which shall annihilate both the blasphemy and the blasphemer. God's judgments are awful replies to the defiances of his foes. When he makes empires crumble and smites persecutors to the heart, his cause is pleaded by himself as none other could have advocated it. Oh, that the Lord himself would come into the battlefield. Long has the fight been trembling in the balance. One glance of his eye, one word from his lip, and the banners of victory shall be borne on the breeze. Remember how the foolish man reproacheth thee daily. The Lord is begged to remember that he is himself reproached, and that by a mere man, that man a fool, and he is also reminded that these foul reproaches are incessant, and repeated with every revolving day. It is bravely done when faith can pluck pleas out of the dragon's mouth, and out of the blasphemies of fools find arguments with God. Verse 23. Forget not the voice of thine enemies. Great warrior, let the foeman's taunt provoke thee to the fray. They challenge thee, accept thou the gage of battle, and smite them with thy terrible hand. If the cries of thy children are too feeble to be heard, be pleased to note the loud voices of thy foes, and silence their profanities forever. The tumult of those that rise up against thee increaseth continually. The ungodly clamour against thee and thy people. Their blasphemies are loud and incessant. They defy thee, even thee, and because thou repliest not, they laugh thee to scorn. They go from bad to worse, from worst to worst. Their fury swells like the thunders of an advancing tempest. What will it come to? What infamy will next be hurled at thee and thine? O God, wilt thou for ever bear this? Hast thou no regard for thine honour, no respect for thy glory? Much of this psalm has passed over our mind while beholding the idolatries of Rome and remembering her bloody persecution of the saints. Footnote: The author visited Rome in November and December 1871 while this portion of the Treasury of David was in progress. End footnote. O Lord, how long shall it be ere thou wilt ease thyself of those profane wretches, the priests, and cast the harlot of Babylon into the ditch of corruption? May thy church never cease to plead with thee till judgment shall be executed, and the Lord avenged upon Antichrist. End of Psalm 74.